hardly recognize myself. I'd like to give a shout out to two people in the arts community here in Frederick and one in the planning community. In the arts community would be Jennifer and Stephen Dobbins, because they were the leaders for the 3 Artomatics that have been held here in Artomatic. Now, and I'm going to come back on why that's important. But Alan, I'd like to thank you. Periodically, Alan will get me on an email or a phone call and suggest that I come up and we have a conversation. We had a very good Zoom call when everything was closed down. Yeah. It was with the Bill. It's when I met, where's Bill? It's when I met Bill. He was on that call. I think that one of the things I'd love to do, first of all, how many of you have ever been to an Artomatic? Oh, that's good turnout. Okay. Yeah, you better. Jennifer and Stephen, I'll just tell you a quick story. Stephen had been to an Artomatic before when we were doing it, because in Washington, we basically cover the region, but it's, the counties that are around DC. And so Stephen called me one day and he says, George, why don't you do an Artomatic in Frederick? And I said, Stephen, why don't you do your own? And that started the process. Now, some of you are probably familiar with TED and TEDx. We've used the same model, okay? Artomatic Frederick, it would be Frederick X, if you will, okay, a TEDx event. We licensed the artist, and they engaged a nonprofit partner to work with them, because partnership's very important. And I think one year you had the Chamber of Commerce, one year...
Yeah, we did FCC.
And then you had the Arts Council.
The Board of Education.
Yeah. So part of it is that the process of Artomatic builds capacity within the arts community. The other thing is that Artomatic has really 3 simple missions. Build community among artists, build an audience for artists, and to focus on the temporary, and I want to emphasize this, the temporary use of vacant space. We're not interested in owning a space. Now, some artists are. We're just a small part of the continuum of what artists do in their community. And what's happened as a result of that is that we've created an environment. I'd like to say that one day I sat down with a piece of paper and put all of this out, right? Well, that's not happened. What happens is that Artomatic was an experiential and an organic process. Things happened. In fact, the very first Artomatic happened because for, I guess, about the last 50 years, 40 years, I've been focused on the issue of artist space. Because Washington's very unique in the sense that we don't have an industrial base. We don't have lots of buildings to recycle. So you've got to be pretty creative about finding space. And I was involved in creating 2 spaces. We converted a vacant elementary school in Georgetown, and we took an old printing plant that used to be the worldwide printing headquarters for the Seventh-day Adventists, which are up here on 270 going out of town. So anyhow, the space that we had in Tacoma, DC, the developer, Douglas Development, came to me one day and said, George, I've got this building, would you guys like to do some art in it? And it was the old Manhattan Laundry in Washington, D.C. It was the last of the hand-operated laundries in D.C. And so he gave us the keys. I reached out to 5 arts organizations, sculptors, a group of printmakers and others, and said, all right, we got this building, we can do what we want. Okay, I mean, we can't tear it down, but we've got the opportunity to use this building. So every Saturday I started doing tours, because for an artist, space is your work environment. You need to see it, you need to experience it. And so every Saturday I started giving tours. So the first Saturday I had about 25 people. The second Saturday I had about 50. The third Saturday I had about 250. What happened is we had a 90,000 square foot capacity, and we filled it up in like 4 weeks. And we filled it up not by saying, all right, we're going to put painters here, we're going to put printmakers here. We said, no, you go pick a space. And we every artist was let loose in the building, and they went and picked their own space. So there can never be a complaint, oh, I didn't get a good space. Well, you got the space you selected. And we said that every artist had to contribute 3 5-hour time shifts to keep the space open. Because Artomatic has no paid staff. It's all artists taking control, doing it ourselves. And so you have to sign up. And then we had a simple website. You go to the website, and we broke out the time frames. You selected the time you wanted, and and your job was to show up. And maybe you greeted people at the door, maybe you worked at the bar. Let's take the bar as an example. We've got one right here. One of the things, where's our bartender? Is he still here? Okay, so one of the things that happens when you work at a bar is that if you've got maybe 3 people there, one person's a dancer, the other person's a musician, and the other person's a painter. In Artomatic, if you're doing that, you're coming away with a new network that you never had. And it's been randomly selected. And that becomes part of how you build community. And that's true with the other jobs that people take on in Artomatic. So it's not just getting the work done, it's giving you the ability to build your community, to build your own network, okay? The other thing that we discovered in Artomatic that was really interesting was that we don't get a grant. I like to say that we're not grant junkies. We accept a grant if somebody wants to give us a grant, but I'm not out hustling to get a grant. Because by putting on the event, we create the money for the event. Now the question is, how do you do that? Okay, so every visual artist would pay a fee, a small fee, compared to what you would do in other environments for the space that they have. That's your startup money. And then, if you've been to an Artomatic, you probably saw a box or a jar or something for you to make a donation. There was nothing on that box or jar that said $5, $10, $2, $1, all right, 50 cents, all right? It was open. We discovered that people are more generous when you let them make up their own mind about what they're going to contribute, rather than us telling them, okay? So everybody has some independence when they come to Artomatic. The other thing that happens with the audience is that I know that if I go to a gallery, and this is not me not being interested in galleries, I mean, we are, but I remember I just said we're at a very beginning stage of this whole process that artists go through. One of the things that we do is that when an audience comes in, for instance, let me back up. If I go to a gallery, I know somebody selected the artwork that they want me to see. Somebody selected that and said, you should look at this, this is what I want you to look at. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's not what we're about. Building community, building an audience. And so what happens is that in Artomatic, for those of you that have gone, you walk along, you see something, you say, God, I don't like that. Oh, hey, that's really interesting. And you're making up your own mind about what you like and what you don't like. You're becoming your own curator. You're becoming your own curator. You're not in a dialogue with the person that created the artwork in a gallery, and you're trying to either not agree with them or to agree with them or whatever it was. It's very, very different. So the audience benefits in this way in a very different than any other kind of an event. The artist benefits in terms of how people make connections. The other thing that we do is something pretty simple. Every artist will have a space. A visual artist, for instance, may have 8 or 10 running feet, okay? An artist may put a little box up there with some cards in it, or put a notepad up there for people to leave notes. And then it's their responsibility to follow up with anybody that's come by in terms of dealing with their space. So, artist, audience, and the process of building community and building an audience. And that's really what Artomatic's about. You know, I guess the other thing is that any artist can participate. We don't jury anybody in. Anybody that wants to participate can participate. And that means that there's a wide variety of art that you're seeing. For instance, we'll get a lot of people, particularly photography, we'll get a lot of people who will come who are shooting photographs on the weekends and other stuff and say, well, I can do that good. And we'll say, well, all right, the next Artomatic, submit your work. And for people who are starting out with their art, whatever it might be, what's happening is they're getting the kind of feedback that corporations pay a lot of money for to get audience response, because they're getting response from people that are participating, that are coming to the event. The other thing that it does, if I'm a visual artist, I usually want to try to get a gallery owner or a curator to see the work. Now we know that gallery owners and curators and collectors come to Artomatic. They love it. The reason they love it is they can make up their own mind about what they're interested in, and nobody's walking beside them. Come see my work, okay? They're making up their own mind about what they like. The other thing that happens for an artist is that if you're trying to get somebody to see your work and there's no Artomatic, the way you get them to see your work is to come to your studio. In Artomatic, you can get people to come to Artomatic and see your work, and the work's usually up for 6 weeks. So there's a real good time frame for you to get people to see your work. So there are all these little things that are part of the Artomatic. It's in these details that really make Artomatic work, besides coming and having a good time and having $5 beers, okay? And meeting friends. The other thing we always say is that Artomatic's a cheap date. We get lots of people coming. Let me just give you some figures. In 2009, we got a brand new building that was 330,000 square feet, 8 stories, right in front of the ballpark in DC. And so we did build out, and I got to remember, the mayor's here, so, but we had to get approval from the regulatory people on what we did. So we did a build out for the partitions for the artists. We created several rooms. We created a poetry room. We created a film room, so forth. Now, when I say we created a room, we just did, drywall up to 8 feet. So, because if you go beyond 8 feet, you've got all kinds of zoning stuff that you got to do. For anybody who's done renovations, you know that. And I think that the thing that has surprised us with the, come on in, folks. The thing that's surprised us is by bringing the people that are, we have a variety of committees, so that when people sign up, we ask them if they want to serve on a committee. And the skill sets that people bring to the table are amazing. I mean, in 2009, we did great mock-ups of the, and that was really great for our DCRA, because we had to really, was a way to show them what we were doing. We had 2,000 visual artists. I'm sorry, we had 1,200 visual artists. We had 2,000 performers who executed 600 performances on 3 stages. And over the 6 weeks that we were open, we had 76,000 visitors. Now, to a developer, I'm not naive. That's what the developer's interested in, the 76,000 visitors. That's what the developer wants. I have a little story on that. In our first Artomatic with Douglas Development, he had done renovations of this building and been trying to rent it and hadn't had any luck. So those of you that know DC, it was on Florida Avenue between 13th and 14th, just below Cardozo. And this was 1999. That was a pretty rough time in terms of the neighborhood. And so what happened was, I guess we'd been open about 3 weeks. This guy comes walking in one day. And obviously, I could tell he wasn't really looking at the art. He was walking around. I went up and introduced myself and said, "Hi, how are you?" And he was the president of a charter school that had been in discussions with Douglas Development about the building. 3 months after we left, we signed a lease. Now, I can't say that we're the exact reason for that, but he did say to me, he said, "You know, this is really different than with the people in it and with the activity going on." And he signed it. And then a second charter school came in and they took all 90,000 square feet. So for the developer, it becomes a win depending upon what they want. Everybody wants something out of the deal. You've got to figure out what that is that they want in the deal. And we've been very fortunate in Artomatic in being able to do that and to put that together. And all those little things that I talked about are what really make it work and create the environment for it. You know, we have, and for me, it started because back in 1970, I needed studio space and got together with about 8 people, and we took over a vacant elementary school in Georgetown and converted it into artist space. And then what happened is we did that, and everybody heard about it, and they started knocking on the door. And then this was, all right, let's go find another space. And that's how we found the warehouse that used to belong to the Seventh-day Adventists. But Doug Jamal was actually our 3rd owner. The property had flipped 3 times. We were able to be there and make it work and provide a capacity for him. So that's kind of, and for me, it all grows out of me wanting a studio space. Okay? And I'll tell you, I never thought that I would bump into so many things about development. Let me tell you one last thing. The Artomatic board, I went to them one day and said, we need to become members of DCBIA. DCBIA is the DC Business and Industry Association. It's where all the developers, all the lawyers that work with developers, all the architects that work with developers, all the plumbers that work with developers, they all come together. And so they said, well, why are we going to do that? So I told them a story. As you can tell, I use stories a lot. I said back in the 20s, there was a bank robber called Willie Sutton. And Willie robbed banks. And they caught Willie. And it went up, a reporter went up to Willie and says, "Willie, why do you rob banks?" He says, "That's where the money is." And so why did Artomatic join DCBIA? Because that's where the money is. I mean, that's where the whole development community is. And if we want to be a part of that, and we want to be able to utilize their properties and stuff, they need to see us in another light, not just a group of artists hanging out on the street corner, okay? Or in a cafe drinking coffee or whatever. And so that really that really makes a difference. So part of it is, like I say, these little things that really make a difference in terms of how you're perceived in the community and how it works. So that's my story. I do a lot of other things, but that's the main thing that I'm doing right now. I guess part of it is really that I enjoy organizing. I enjoy being with my fellow artists and putting it together. And I've really been fortunate. I had this day job in the government and was able to spend my evenings and weekends doing all this, which meant that I didn't do as much art as I should, but I made a choice.